Dan Osman wasn't just any climber, he was a living legend, someone who turned the impossible into an art form. Known for his gravity-defying solos and speed ascents, he craved the rush that came with every daring leap, which wasn't the best idea for him. Can you guess why? Dan Osman was always destined for a life that was anything but ordinary. Born to a father who was an elite SWAT officer with a samurai lineage, and a mother who was a two-time rodeo champion, it's no wonder Dano, as he was fondly called, was bound for an extraordinary path. From an early age, he gravitated towards adventure and danger, almost as if it was written in his DNA. His introduction to extreme climbing came naturally, and it wasn't long before he began to carve out his reputation in the world of high-stakes climbing. By the early 1990s, Osman's daring solo ascents started to turn heads. Soloing is a kind of climbing that leaves no room for error, no ropes, no safety nets, just you and the rock. For most people, the idea of scaling a towering cliff with nothing to save you if you fall is unimaginable. But for Osman, it was a calling. One of his most legendary climbs was his solo ascent of Atlantis, a 5.11 route up a 500 feet cliff face that remains untouched by even today's top climbers. This climb wasn't just about skill, it was about pure nerve. Modern climbing phenom Alex Honnold, who is widely regarded as the best free soloist of our time, has passed up any attempts to repeat Osman's notorious ascent of Atlantis. That says something about just how dangerous and impressive it was. Another climb that forever cemented Dano's place in the Climbing Hall of Fame was his solo at Lover's Leap. His style was anything but traditional. He practically sprinted up the wall, leaping and lunging in a speed climb that defied every rule of cautious climbing. His iconic double dino move, a kind of mid-air leap where both hands simultaneously leave the rock 200 feet off the ground, became an image that stuck in the minds of climbers everywhere. Watching Osman was a mixture of awe and horror. He was a showman, yes, but there was no denying his skill and athleticism. Climbing at 90 feet per minute, he set a bar that few climbers would ever attempt to reach. And then there was the human flag. It was a move that took even the wildest of his ascents and made them unforgettable. Imagine seeing someone hanging horizontally off a cliff, body extended like a flag on a pole, with nothing but strength keeping them in place. That was Osman. This move wasn't just about showing off, it became symbolic of his fearless approach to life and climbing. Despite breaking several ribs in a BMX accident earlier that day, he performed the human flag during his ascent of Atlantis. It was just another day for Dano, a man who lived life fully at the edge. Dan Osman wasn't content with just being a legendary climber. He wanted to push the boundaries of what was possible in the world of extreme sports. And that's exactly what he did when he invented rope jumping, or as he liked to call it, rope flying. This wasn't just another adrenaline-packed stunt. It was a whole new sport that the world had never seen before. The idea was simple. Jump off a massive structure, free fall hundreds of feet, and trust the rig you built to save you from certain death. Sounds insane, right? Well, Osman thrived on it. The mechanics of rope jumping were both impressive and terrifying. Dano would set up an intricate system of climbing ropes, pulleys, and slings that allowed him to hurl himself from incredible heights and swing safely through the air. The thrill came from the free fall, sometimes lasting up to 10 seconds before the rig would catch him just before hitting the ground. It was like skydiving, but without a plane, and it required a lot of precision in building these jump setups. For Osman, that precision was everything. If the rig wasn't built perfectly, the results could be disastrous. What made rope jumping such a spectacle was the combination of awe and fear it evoked in those who witnessed it. Watching someone plummet off a cliff or bridge and then swing to safety just feet from the ground was nothing short of mind-blowing. It was both an engineering marvel and a death-defying stunt, and for some, that's where the controversy lay. Many considered it reckless, and there was a growing divide between those who admired Osman's fearlessness and those who condemned it as pure madness. The steps involved in rope jumping were as straightforward as they were terrifying. First, you had to find the perfect spot, something with several hundred feet of open space below. It could be a bridge, a cliff, or even a towering tree. Then came the setup, which was far from simple. Osman was a master at constructing these rigs, combining his climbing expertise with careful planning to ensure the ropes, pulleys, and slings could handle the extreme forces involved. Finally, once everything was in place, came the jump. That moment of stepping off the edge, knowing full well that your life depended on the rig holding was what gave rope jumping its signature thrill. It was the ultimate leap of faith. By the mid-90s, Dan Osman had begun breaking records with his rope jumps. On his 32nd birthday in 1995, he set a world record with an astonishing 660 feet jump from a bridge in Northern California. This wasn't just any jump, it was a carefully calculated free fall that showcased his mastery of the sport he had created. As with many of Osman's stunts, it was equal parts mesmerizing and terrifying. But rope jumping wasn't without its risks, and in 1994, those risks became tragically clear. Bobby Tarver, one of Osman's proteges, attempted a jump from the Utah Bridge. Osman wasn't able to be there that day, and Tarver, eager to leap, went ahead without him. Unfortunately, he failed to check the elasticity of the rope, a simple but crucial step. The miscalculation resulted in a violent collision with the canyon wall, and though Tarver was briefly revived after the fall, he passed away shortly after. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the extreme sports community and sparked a debate about the dangers of rope jumping. By 1998, Dan Osman had already shattered multiple records in the world of extreme sports, but he wasn't done yet. His next target was Yosemite's Leaning Tower, a towering rock formation that stands as one of the most iconic features of the national park. Osman, ever the daredevil, returned to Yosemite with a clear goal in mind to break his record. This time he planned to rig a massive 1,200 feet line between Leaning Tower and a smaller rock formation known as Fifi Buttress. It was an ambitious setup that required incredible precision and expertise. Osman was no stranger to pushing the limits, and this jump was going to be the ultimate test. The first jumps leading up to the fateful day were a success. Osman methodically tested his rig, starting with shorter jumps, 600 feet at first, and then increasing the length with each successful leap. As the week progressed, he was regularly free-falling 900 feet, hurtling through the air at terrifying speeds before the rope caught him. It seemed as if everything was working flawlessly, but for Osman, it wasn't enough. He wanted more, and he had his sights set on one final jump, a 1,000 feet free fall, his most daring yet. On October 23, 1998, the stage was set. Osman had added an extra 75 feet of rope to his jump, a bold decision that dangerously reduced his margin for error. This meant that he would come shockingly close to the valley floor, leaving just 100 feet of clearance between him and the ground. It was risky, to say the least, and his close friend Miles Dasher wasn't convinced it was a good idea. He voiced his concerns, but Osman was resolute. Moments before the jump, Osman called two of his friends, telling them, "This is it, I'm going big." With that, he stepped off the edge, launching himself into the abyss. For 10 heart-stopping seconds, Osman plummeted through the darkness, his headlamp disappearing into the void. Everything seemed to be going as planned, until it wasn't. Instead of the rope catching him as it had in previous jumps, something went wrong. There was a scream, followed by the terrifying sound of the rope snapping. Dasher, watching from above, immediately knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. When Dasher rappelled down to the base, he found Osman's body. The jump rig had failed, and Osman had died on impact. It was a tragic and shocking end for one of the most daring athletes of his generation. The aftermath of Dan Osman's fatal accident sent shockwaves through the extreme sports community. Miles Dasher, who had been there for the final jump, was devastated. The rig, which had been a marvel of engineering up until that point, had failed in the most tragic way possible. In the immediate aftermath, rumors began swirling. Some believed that the rig had been sabotaged, a theory fueled by the long-standing tensions between Yosemite climbers and the park rangers. Climbers in the area had often butted heads with law enforcement over safety regulations, and the idea that someone might have tampered with Osman's setup didn't seem far-fetched to some. Adding fuel to the fire were claims that Yosemite law enforcement was covering something up. In the weeks following the accident, there was very little information released to the public about what had gone wrong. This lack of transparency only deepened suspicions. Some even believed that the park rangers had a hand in the failure of the jump rig, as they had repeatedly expressed their disapproval of Osman's extreme stunts. The theories persisted, but no concrete evidence ever emerged to support them. Determined to get answers, a group of Osman's friends decided to take matters into their own hands. They retrieved a portion of the broken jump line and sent it to Black Diamond Equipment for analysis. Yosemite law enforcement wasn't happy about this, warning Black Diamond that if they didn't return the rope, the FBI would get involved. Despite the threats, the investigation moved forward, and the results were finally revealed months after Osman's death. Chris Harmston, an engineer from Black Diamond, conducted a thorough examination of the rope and found that the cause of Osman's death was not sabotage or weather damage. Instead, it was a tragic case of human error. As it turned out, Osman had miscalculated the jump angle, causing the ropes to cross. The friction from the massive freefall melted the nylon rope connected to his harness, leading to its catastrophic failure. It was a fatal mistake in what had otherwise been an expertly constructed rig. Dan Osman didn't just leave behind a reputation as a fearless climber. He carved out a whole new sport that changed the way people think about adventure. His invention of rope jumping wasn't just a one-off stunt, it became his signature, and it still resonates with the extreme sports community today. Osman's daring, record-breaking feats were so far ahead of their time that people are still in awe of them. He turned the impossible into reality, and in doing so, inspired a generation of climbers, adventurers, and thrill-seekers who wanted to test their limits. One of the most remarkable things about Osman's legacy is how it continues to influence modern athletes. Even after his death, climbers and rope jumpers look to him as a pioneer of pushing the boundaries. Notable jumpers like Alexei Bokuch have since taken on Osman's challenge, going even bigger and more outrageous. Bokuch holds the current record for rope jumping with an unbelievable 1,400 feet jump, but it's clear that Dano paved the way for such feats. While others may have taken the sport to new heights, Osman was the original who dared to dream that big. This marked the first time the setup had been repeated since he died in 1998. It was more than just a stunt, it was a tribute to a man who was willing to risk everything for the thrill of pushing the limits. Dan Osman's death was a stark reminder of the high price that comes with extreme sports. For athletes like Osman, the line between triumph and tragedy is often razor thin. One moment you're riding the wave of adrenaline, and the next, everything can go wrong. In Osman's case, it was a fatal miscalculation, an overlooked detail that cost him his life. The risks that he took were not for the faint-hearted, and his tragic end only reinforces how dangerous these pursuits can be. Osman's contribution to the world of extreme sports is undeniable. He pushed the boundaries of what was thought to be physically possible and in the process expanded human potential. His legacy is one of courage, innovation, and a thirst for the unknown. But his story also serves as a cautionary tale. It shows us that while pushing the limits can lead to incredible achievements, it also comes with very real dangers. For Dano, the drive to go further, higher, and faster ultimately came at the highest cost. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.